Rollie, great news.
Hit me with it, big boots.
We've done such a great job communicating about climate misinformation that we've actually answered every single possible question about it.
Just as I suspected. Very good.
Oh, wait, sorry. I'm now looking at page 2 of my notes. Actually, a bunch of our fans have written in with a deluge of other questions for us to answer about climate change.
You're saying page 1 of your notes said we've answered all the questions, and then page 2 said, actually, no, we didn't?
The font is very big.
Oh, okay. Cool. Then I'll allow it. Let's answer some questions.
Okay, everybody, it's a mailbag episode.
It's a mailbag episode.
It's a mailbag episode, and you know what that means. We didn't do any research.
You know, for every episode we do what, like 4 weeks of research for it?
Yeah, if not more. We do 4 weeks of research, and then Ben listens to me practice and says you didn't do enough research, and then I have to go back and do more research.
So they're heavily, what we're trying to say is they're heavily researched episodes, and sometimes we just want to sit down and knock out an episode, and the best way to do that is with a mailbag episode.
Yes.
And so what we've done is we've solicited questions from our Patreon page, which we have, and if you are out there and you're listening to this and you're like, how do I submit questions? I'm going to say generously 4% of you that thought that and didn't know about our Patreon page. We have a Patreon page. It's a fun community for listeners of the podcast, and you can also sometimes submit questions, and Nicole and I will answer those questions.
Yes, even though I am not a member of my own Patreon community because I don't know how to do it without paying, and I'm not going to pay to be in my own Patreon.
Tell you what, I'll split the cost with you.
Okay. That's a deal.
Just invoice me every month for $2.50.
But that's not all. We've also sourced questions from the team that makes the podcast.
Therefore, diminishing the value of the Patreon page because they're no longer the exclusive askers of questions.
Well,
if you can just work for the podcast
if any of those people want to do the truly nightmarish amount of research that Carly and Canute and James have to do.
All right.
Then fine.
We're officially soliciting. That's true. That's maybe a perk of working for the podcast. You also get to ask one question once every 6 months.
Not look us directly in the eye when they do it.
That's right. And if they bring me a coffee that's too hot, I make them hold the mug until it burns them, obviously. And that's not all, because producer Ben actually has some secret questions he's specifically solicited from people in our lives that he's going to lob over the trench that he's dug himself in his little producer bay, and then they're going to explode into our laps.
Great. I love it.
So without further ado, let's kick this thing off. Let's get some questions from the patrons.
Hit us with your best shot.
Hit me with your best shot.
Do we have the rights for that?
We have the rights for me singing it.
Okay, Rollie, we're going to start with a question for you.
Oh, pass.
You can't pass on the first question. You don't even know what it is.
Well, let me hear it.
This is from our patron, Professor Majkowski.
Oh, pass for sure. Pass.
I think you're going to want to hear this question.
All right, okay, fine.
Okay, Professor Majkowski wants to know, can I borrow $10?
Oh, yeah. If you DM us your Venmo handle, I'll personally Venmo you $10.
Great. Okay.
I'm playing the long game with Majkowski here, okay? I'm thinking if I give them $10, they're going to say, wow, I can invest a ton of money into this Patreon page and get it all back out at the end. And then I'm not going to give them that money back.
You're not going to explain how a Patreon works.
That's right. Yeah.
It's not like an investment vehicle.
It's a Patreon scheme. Okay, Nicole, here's a question for you. This is from our patron, Jason Graham.
All right, hit me.
Why has the U.S. failed repeatedly to get large-scale rail infrastructure at every turn, while much of the world is either trying to or outright succeeding at building rail infrastructure? This is extra confusing when considering that the U.S. once had the most extensive rail infrastructure in the world, leaps and bounds ahead of anybody else. So that was from Jason Graham. Why can't we have good trains anymore?
I did it.
You did it?
Yeah.
What the fuck?
Sorry.
Are you serious?
Yeah, it's me.
What did you... What?
I thought it'd be a funny prank.
It's not even close to a prank. It's like single-handedly destroying American infrastructure.
Sorry.
You can't sorry this away. You're an adult, Nicole. Wait a minute. Did you really do it?
No.
Oh, okay.
So this is a really good question, and there are a lot of complicated answers. So one, an issue that we see in California a lot is like who owns the rights to the land, and how you resolve like you can't just eminent domain people's land anymore. They tend to look down on that.
Anymore. Not like the good old days.
And so that's tricky. There's also like, sometimes you'll see that map of the United States that shows like, we could have this, and it'll show like the cross-country high-speed rail, and it's like geologically, like that doesn't make a lot of sense. One thing that's a bummer about high-speed rail is in the most like realistic plan, there's no stop in Denver, and it's like, but that's the one place I need to go.
Ain't No Stop in Denver would kill on the country music charts.
Okay, let's write one.
Ain't no stop in Denver. No, it can't start with that. The songs don't always start with their titles, but I'll work on it.
Yeah.
What do you mean there's no stop in Denver?
Like if you look at the like most realistic scenario map for what like cross country rail would look like, it doesn't make sense for them to go to Denver.
Oh, so it's like the more you stop, the less high speed the rail gets, so you can't be stopping.
Yes, so that's another problem in California, but it is just like the number of trips and the like topography of getting to Denver just like doesn't make sense for what the high-speed rail plan would be.
How many times do we have to legalize weed before they'll send a fucking train to Denver? This is bullshit, Nicole. You know trains love smoking. You see them start up, boop, boop.
Yeah, what do you think that stuff that comes out of the smokestack is?
That's weed. That's Chief Keef's breath, my friend.
So getting the land is a problem. In California, another problem is like they're basically ready to build high-speed rail, but rail is very attractive to cities and everybody wants to be a stop. But the more stops there are on high-speed rail, the less high speed it becomes. And particularly for like being the last stop outside of Los Angeles would like be a huge economic booster to a city because a ton of people would move there because they could commute into Los Angeles. And so they're like fighting over that. There's also issues with passenger rail versus freight rail.
Oh yeah, I took an Amtrak train and they made us stop a bunch of times in the middle of the night.
Freight has right of way
because the freight is like, we got to get these 2x4s to Sacramento.
Yeah.
That was a bummer.
Yeah.
But I suppose Sacramento did need those 2x4s.
Yeah, and there's also cases where airlines have really lobbied against high-speed rail. So
whatever for.
So one like particularly promising rail corridor, again, I want to remind everybody we did not do any research for this podcast, so double check all my facts on this.
This is all coming from 2017 and your urban planning degree.
One particularly like promising high-speed rail corridor could have been in Florida, believe it or not, because they have several major cities that are like spaced out enough to justify high-speed rail, and Southwest went in and was like, no. This is like where we have a lot of flights. You can't build high-speed rail there. Dang. So those are some of the reasons. You see it a lot in a place like China because, I mean, a bunch of reasons. One is like because of the structure of their government, they can just
still eminent domain the land.
You can still eminent domain it, but then they also have like different land value capture systems. Like they make money because they own the land under the train station and rent that out in long-term leases, whereas the finances just don't make the same kind of sense in America. This is actually a really good, complicated question, and producer Ben, I would love to do a longer episode about trains where I can do more research on it.
Oh my God. Jason Graham, you have just asked a question into an episode, and that was the first question that I've asked Nicole. Congratulations, Jason. You are getting your money's worth. I am also going to Venmo you $10.
You don't promise to give away all of our Patreon money.
It's my it'll be my personal money.
Okay.
I will I'm $20 in the hole on this episode.
If I had to give you the TLDR of like why there's not more high-speed rail, it's about the ownership rights currently are both of like railway right-of-way and land. I think that's like the most basic answer, but it's also much more complicated than that as well.
Awesome.
Okay, so I was talking for a long time about rail, which is always a risk when you're having a conversation with me. So, Rollie, let's throw it back to you.
Okay.
This is a question from patron Jess C.
Jesse?
Jess, space, C.
Yeah, Jesse. Yeah. This is our Who's On First modernized.
It's not as funny.
Abbott and Costello's Who's On First is not that funny anymore by modern standards.
I think it's pretty funny.
When's the last time you watched a Who's On First rendition?
This morning.
That's fucking not true, Nicole.
How do you like that?
I don't think that's true. I think you're lying on a podcast.
Rollie, this question is for you.
All right, hit
me.
From
Jess C.
Jesse, you got it. No problem.
How do you deal with the emotions that come from working in this space? Does it just become normal? Did it give you a different type of normal? Due to my husband's climate research and me being a hippie, nice. You can't see, but I just did peace signs with my hands.
She did. And she's doing a smoke the weed sign right now.
I'm not doing that.
She's doing it big time.
Due to my husband's climate research and me being a hippie, we're often talking about some very heavy aspects of the environment and climate. I think it's worn me down over the years, and I wonder how you do given that you're in that space.
Oh, that's a great question, Jess C. Yeah, what?
Jesse?
I think weirdly the anxiety comes from the feeling of powerlessness more than it does like the acknowledgement of the problem. And so getting to get behind a microphone with at one point I've said best friend and you've said best friend. I don't know that I have best friends, but if I did, Nicole would be the best friend.
I don't know why you had to couch it in that. I think you could have probably just called me your best friend.
The phrase couching it in something is forever ruined by JD Vance, just saying. But one of my greatest all-time friends, Nicole, and I get to sit down and talk about it. Producer Ben and producer Daniela are here, and we're like thinking of these problems. And all day, every day, we get to research stuff and call experts and talk to people who are trying to move policy forward. And all of that feels, I don't know that I'm actually doing anything that's all that helpful, but it feels like I kind of am. And that makes the climate anxiety a lot more tolerable.
Yeah. I think if you kind of just let it wash over you, you know that like parable that's like, you ask a fish what water feels like.
And they say,
yeah, exactly. And they're like, what's water? Because they're just like surrounded by it. I think at this point I'm so like deep in climate content all the time that it's just, the context of my surroundings. It doesn't freak me out the same way that it used to.
And I guess in order to make it actionable for you, Jess, provided you don't want to start a live comedy show where you play Al Gore that turns into a YouTube channel because of the global pandemic that has a splinter cell that branches into a podcast. If you want to do something a little more off the beaten path, I guess, I would say this is a situation where like becoming part of a group or movement or something is really helpful. Local organizing, that kind of thing. Even if you go and you don't really like it, or you go and you don't find the right group right away, I think the feeling of getting out there and talking to other people who also feel the same problem, these are the sorts of things that lift some of that grief, because you're no longer feeling like you're isolated and alone. Even though you and your husband talk about it all the time, you feel a little more like you're helping impact something. And that's actually how change happens and works, like it doesn't happen if everybody is just feeling anxious in their houses about it. It happens when they, storm the Capitol.
No,
yeah,
Rollie,
yeah. So what I'm saying, Jess, is storm the Capitol.
Also, this can feel a little cringe and like you don't want to delude yourself and whatever, but like it's not against the rules to every once in a while Google like what's some good climate
How do I
stuff.
make a bomb?
No, Rollie,
what?
No. We can't keep advocating for terrorism on this podcast.
Sorry, they're just so hot.
You can Google like what is like some good environmental news, because like we all got to get out of bed in the morning,
Nearest Al Qaeda cell.
We're gonna get put on a list. One time, have we talked about this on the podcast before? I think the hardest Rollie has ever made me break in an improv set is neither of us could really like figure out what was happening. We were clearly in a car and like annoyed at each other, and we kept being like, well, we're gonna be late. I can't believe you're like this. And truly 90 seconds to 2 minutes into the scene, nothing had happened. And Rollie was like, well, we're gonna miss this suicide bombing.
I don't remember that, but that is pretty funny. I think, I actually do kind of remember we do a lot of scenes where we're in a car together.
Yeah.
Oh, this was before we were car pilled, I guess. But I remember a scene where we had cut back to the third beat of a scene where we were in a car. That's like an improv term for like we had gone and done a bunch of other scenes and then came back to that first one. And I just remember saying, okay, I would fuck Martha Stewart, marry Princess Diana, and kill Hitler. And I just remember it would be such a funny fuck, marry, kill of those three people. Anyway, that might have been from the same set.
It could have been.
I can't remember. So anyway, don't do terrorism, but do organize.
That's a good lesson.
Okay, Nicole, this question comes from Patrick T. Patrick T. Nicole, in a previous episode, you said you have some criticism of Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg's policies. Can you elaborate?
I think he's a little bit too cozy with the car companies.
Interesting.
I think that's the big one.
He's out here advocating for electric vehicles instead of trains.
That's part of it. I also just think like if you go all the way back to Obama, like when we bailed out the auto companies, we had the opportunity to like put rules in place to like make them better, and we just didn't. And it's car companies are like, if you give an inch, they take a mile. That being said, I will say that since we recorded that episode, season 2, episode 4 or 5, I can't remember which one I referenced Pete Buttigieg in specifically, but it's one of the EVs. He has grown on me a little bit. I think what Pete Buttigieg does well is he's like willing to go on Fox News, and he like uses pretty clear talking points.
He's a fucking genius. Like the way that man talks it's like everything is written out ahead of time. And I think I even said this about him last time. Like I'm constantly amazed by that man's stage presence.
Yeah.
End of sentence. I'm just he's impressive, dude.
Yeah, he's grown on me, and I think part of why he's grown on me is at least like in this run up to Kamala picking her VP. I think everybody was like obviously trying to put their best foot forward.
You can't pick Buttigieg because his name doesn't look good on a sign. I really think that. Like Harris Buttigieg, like I don't know. I mean, I think he's obviously going to run for president again, but it didn't feel like he was making it all about himself, which I appreciated because I think there were. I don't know. I think that I'm really glad we ended up with Walz, but like at this critical moment in the Democratic Party, it really felt like everybody was just like, just whatever it takes to. It doesn't have to be me. Just pick somebody that is going to win. And I appreciate that. And I don't know. I think the McKinsey-ness of him is somewhat anathema to me, and that is more of an aesthetic criticism than a substantive one. But that
my policy
kicked ass.
Thank you so much.
Said. That
Thank
fucking
you.
Ruled. That was great. I hope somebody clips that out and puts that sentence on like a pillow somewhere.
His McKinsey-ness is anathema to me, but that's an aesthetic criticism. That's a big ass pillow.
Yeah. Well, throw a pillow.
One of those long body pillows.
Yeah. Boyfriend pillow.
But my policy issues are that I think he's been too kind to the auto companies, and they, you got to kind of wrap their knuckles a little harder. I am HO. In my honest opinion. I
was like, you are HO what? What are you fucking talking about? Great answer. Thank you, Nicole.
Great answer. Okay, Rollie, I got a question for you from James Jenkinson.
Oh, okay. Nice name. Alliterative.
We love an alliterative name.
I do.
James
Herbert
asked,
Hoover. Sorry. I don't love that guy, but Herbert Hoover's a good name.
Calvin Coolidge.
Oh.
That has the k sound, which
and
is
his
funny.
last name is Coolidge.
Yeah.
Who is this guy? Calvin Coolidge? He's got sunglasses and he just did a kickflip? Come on.
James wants to know, what do you guys think on the debate of nuclear energy with regards to sustainable energy? Here in Germany, wow, international.
Uh-oh.
Here in Germany, the Green Party has closed down all nuclear reactors. Meanwhile, in France, they've defined nuclear energy as green energy. I have no idea what to make of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm also in that boat. The more I learn about it, the more I realize it's like a complicated technology shift. And I mean, look, this is me talking out of school. I'm working on a nuclear episode right now, but I don't have a very obvious conclusion. I think the big problem with nuclear is that technologically it's super difficult. It's a hard technology to master, and the more you put into production, the cheaper they are and the better you get at it. And we've been decommissioning a lot of nuclear in the States and I guess also Germany, and that kind of moves you the wrong direction on the experience curve. So we have to like make up some ground there. And there's also a lot of environmental groups who are kind of saying like, look, we can do all this with wind power and solar power and we don't risk a meltdown. And there's an argument that like technologically we're pretty far away from meltdowns. Like the last big meltdown was Fukushima, and we kind of know why that melted down. So
per unit of energy generated in the history of our energy system, nuclear is the safest, I think.
Yeah, it's like the safest by kind of a long shot. But it also, safety isn't the only factor, and like building a lot of nuclear is a big factor. I mean, I think it would be really great if we could get the permitting for it. I remember my professor Travis Bradford from Columbia was saying, like, people are only going to build nuclear if they can get a rock solid guarantee from the government that they won't be delayed for even a year by environmental groups protesting it, because even a 1-year delay is going to wipe out the feasibility of the business, according to Professor Travis Bradford, one time in 2020.
It is a huge upfront cost investment. I tend to be a little bit more bullish about nuclear as a technology, but I'm also not a scientist. I think one tricky thing with nuclear is a lot of like 60s environmentalism was born out of like anti-nuclear sentiment.
Yeah.
And we still have a lot of that feeling in our modern environmental movements. And so I remember when I was working with 350 Colorado on the newsletter, there was somebody who wanted to write a pro-nuclear piece for the newsletter that was just about the technology, not necessarily arguing for any place specifically, but it is, I believe, against 350 guidelines generally to have any pro-nuclear stance. So in America, at least, one of the big problems with nuclear is like getting the environmental movement on the same page. My opinion is that like we definitely shouldn't be shutting down any existing nuclear plants that are already pumping out energy unless there is some like very present safety concern. I think that they should like live to the end of their lifespan because it is such a high upfront capital cost and does require a lot of concrete, which is tricky.
Yeah, it probably takes a lot of concrete, but it takes a lot of energy to make a wind turbine. It takes a lot of raw materials to make solar panels. I just think every version of making a ton of energy comes with some drawbacks, and one of the big drawbacks of nuclear power is that it's like high lift, high reward, and it's just a lot easier to get the permitting done on low lift, low reward shit like solar panels, and medium lift, medium reward with wind turbines. And when I say medium reward and low reward, I mean it's actually like very positive things. It's just like the amount of wattage you get out of each individual piece is lower than a reactor.
I think the unsatisfying answer is that our energy mix around the world is partially based on like what makes sense in the place that you're in. And so like the reason that France has embraced nuclear power so much is that they didn't really have any natural resources in the form of carbon. And so that like made the most sense for them in terms of getting energy. Whereas like in Appalachia in the United States, there was a shit ton of coal. And so that's like why there are still so many coal power plants there, even though we're like rapidly decommissioning them. So I think nuclear is always going to be part of a worldwide clean energy strategy. As far as what makes sense in your backyard in Germany, oh, I don't know.
All right, Nicole, I got a question for you.
Hit me.
And when I say I mean Natalie, one of our patrons. I tried to come up with a serious question, but couldn't. So I'll just ask you this. What is your favorite kind of cheese?
I like a feta. My family's Greek.
I hate feta and my family's Greek.
Interesting.
Huh.
Go figure. What's your stance on olives?
Don't care for them.
I also don't love olives.
Huh.
We just went to France, and all of their cheeses there are, wow, so good. Wow. Holy crap, so good.
Nicole's sort of doing French Trump over there.
They've got the most wonderful cheeses. They've got Gruyere.
Sacre bleu. Wow, so good. We're doing a newsletter right now about how fucked up the dairy lobby is in America right now. So picking any cheese is actually really
problematic.
Yeah. So the only wrong answer was picking any cheese. And
I failed.
I'm so sorry.
I love a feta and I love a camembert.
Oh.
Love a camembert.
Soft cheese.
Yeah.
It's for your nice soft teeth.
Okay, Rollie, this is a question from Leah.
Oh.
Not your Leah.
Okay.
Laya. L-I-A.
Liar. She thinks she's my girlfriend.
Leah wants to know, isn't the earth flat?
Is it? No. What am I thinking of? Pizza. No, yeah. The earth is a sphere, but or a oblique spheroid or whatever.
Here's a fun fact I read that is relevant to you because you like billiards.
Hey, I'm in. I'm back in.
I read that if you blew up a billiards ball to the size of the earth, it would be way more like jagged and rugged. Like the earth is so spherical.
I think I heard Neil deGrasse Tyson say that on a podcast, and I think that's wrong. I don't know. I don't have a lot of evidence for that, but I just think that's wrong.
That's one of those facts that I heard 15 to 20 years ago that my brain was like, got it. This is true, and we're going to remember it forever.
I have also heard that fact, and I've just thought to myself, that can't be true. And so I don't know if it's right or wrong.
Wow, our first disagreement on the podcast is about how smooth the earth is compared to a billiards ball.
I guess you can get away with it because it's easy to be like, well, they don't make every billiards ball perfect. But I think the Aramith company that makes my favorite kind of billiards balls.
Yawn.
What? You asked me. Jesus Christ. You brought this up, and now I'm talking about billiards. No, I think they're pretty freaking round, dude.
Okay.
All right, Nicole, this is a question for you. It is also from Jason Graham. The guy who asked that first question.
My biggest fan.
I'm not sure that Jason Graham knows that he's going to get at least one episode of this actual podcast out of his question, but you might get a second one. The question is somebody who actively gets, believes, and reiterates their climate news from Fox News already too far gone? And if not, what's the best way to reach this type of person?
Wow, good question. I don't know. I think if they're getting all their climate news from Fox News, that's probably not a good sign. I think the best way to reach that person is to find the climate policies that are beneficial in other ways. So the IRA is a climate bill, but it also helps support broadband internet across the country. It's a climate bill, but it will also give you a rebate for your car. And there's lots of other policies in place. We talked a little bit about this in the 15-Minute Cities episode, I think, where rather than talk about it as a 15-minute city, be like, hey, they're putting a restaurant near your house. That's pretty cool, right?
Well, what kind of restaurant is it? Is it a Red Lobster?
It's a Qdoba.
Awesome. I love Qdoba.
Great.
You know what? I actually heard this recently, and I think it's really smart. Every time Trump is asked about climate change, he's like, when I was president, we had the cleanest air and the cleanest water. And it's like, you motherfucker, that's not what they're talking about. But that actually tests really well. And so it's go use that. Oh yeah, I want the cleanest air and the cleanest water. And there's all this carbon dioxide in the air, and that makes the air unclean. And it's like, that maybe is the judo move. We got to learn.
We got to learn from Donald Trump. I'm always saying we got to be more like Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Okay, Rollie, this is for you. This is from Jacob. Where do you personally put the needle between doomer messaging and the Hannah Ritchie we're winning green growth style messaging?
Oh, I guess I don't do a lot of doomer messaging. I like to look at historical trends and bring up old media and look at old arguments and stuff. So I enjoy looking at some doomerism media, but personally I don't cotton to that kind of philosophy. And I think if we're going to make it out of this hole we've dug ourselves as a globe, it's going to be through green growth and green jobs and policy shift and mindset shift. And so that's kind of what I put a lot of my energy behind.
Yeah, I think a lot of doomer messaging is more about looking cool and seeming like you're smarter than everybody, and it's less about doing anything helpful.
Yeah, I guess if you're throwing an aluminum can in the trash and you're like, whatever, this planet's fucked anyways, it's like, yeah, but that's what a person who doesn't believe in climate change also does.
Yeah.
So if somebody did not speak English in this moment, they would be like, this guy's a fucking idiot. So I judge you by your actions, not your words.
Yeah, there's this journalist from
that.
He did.
Jesus said that.
He also said, "Cowabunga, dudes."
Yeah, and he also said, "What the hell am I driving?"
There's this journalist from Colorado named Chase Woodruff who one time tweeted something along the lines of there's not going to be a point of no return where we can never make anything better ever again, and there's not going to be one moment where it's magically fixed either. So all you can do is, keep going and keep trying and always try to make things a little bit better.
I feel like I've said that exact same thing. I wonder if I stole it from Chase Woodruff.
Maybe he stole it from you.
Oh my God. Chase, if you're out there,
It's on, dude.
It's on site. It's hands on site. No, let's tweet at each other or something. All right. This question comes from Justin R. I'm curious about y'all's thoughts on the protest actions of groups like Just Stop Oil, such as the paint on cases of famous paintings, Stonehenge, or Taylor Swift's plane. Do you think this is an effective method of protest? Do you think people are overreacting to these protests given the lack of damage to the art in question? I think I know what your opinion is. Will we see more of these types of protests as time goes on and climate change becomes even bigger of a problem? If that's possible, lol. Okay, this guy rocks. I like this guy. Love the podcast. Yes, I knew I liked this guy. I've even
What if somebody wrote us a question was like, I hate your podcast at the end of it?
I'd be like, thanks for the feedback.
Thanks for supporting the Patreon.
Yeah. I'll Venmo them $10. Love the podcast. Love this guy. I've even got my parents hooked on it. Oh, shit. Y'all rock. God, Justin Rotterman.
Parents. I actually want to do a whole episode about this at another point. So, spoiler alert. I'm generally pro these protests. I think one interesting point is like I think the suffragettes did very similar stuff when they were
fucking stabbed people. They wore hat pins so they could stab people.
But they also like slashed paintings and did actual damage to the paintings. I think one thing that's often lost, I don't know as much about the Stonehenge incident, but
Stonehenge. The Druids done it.
I don't know as much about that one, but like the art protests, I think are they're a good message. I think part of the reason they haven't been more effective is because our art education in this country is so fucking bad that people can't like process anything that takes place on a symbolic level at all. But it is both like a metaphor for like, hey, this really precious thing that we can't get back could be irreparably damaged. Does that remind you of anything else? And so that's one level, but it's also like BP uses its sponsorship of museums and stuff to greenwash themselves, or not. It's not even greenwashing. It's just whitewashing because they're like, look, we support culture. And so that's like why those seemingly unrelated protests happen.
They should use green paint instead of orange paint.
I think on a place like Stonehenge, if you see green paint, you're like, is that moss?
Is that moss on Stonehenge?
Yeah.
Yeah. Stonehenge is well mossy today, it is. Yeah, I think I totally agree. Like people, it sort of strikes me the same as when you see somebody running, if you're driving in a car and you see somebody running on the street, a little part of me thinks like, fuck that guy.
Whoa.
I know, because it's like, because I'm not running.
That's what cars do to your brain.
It's also like, I feel a little bit bad about myself that I'm not out there running. I mean, like I exercise sometimes, like I'm not.
Brag.
Like, I just think the gut reaction is like, you think you're so smart and cool and you know everything, guy running on the street. I think it's got a similar thing. When you hear about a protest that like destroys something.
Sure. It's like, what, I'm not doing anything.
Yeah.
And these people are, now going to jail for 5 years because they were on a Zoom call about shutting down a highway.
Yeah. And how do I make this okay? And how do I make my inaction okay? It's by making these people like dorks or just pests or something.
Yeah. And I think like anti-climate people are always going to like point to these actions and be like, these people are bad and not to be trusted, and they only care about destruction and not how does this help the earth at all? And again, it's like they were literally shouting it while they glued themselves to the wall, but if you don't want to listen to them, then fine. But I think like if you look at like the Colin Kaepernick incident where like he sat during the anthem and then everybody was like, you can't sit. Well, at first it was like, you're not standing for the anthem. And so then he like talked to the troops and was like, what's a way that I can be respectful to you while still like making the point I want to make about like the way that the country treats different races differently. And they were like, how about you kneel? And he's like, great, I'll kneel. And then everybody was like, he's kneeling. He's bad.
That's even worse.
It's wrong. And it's like, there isn't ever going to be like a right way to protest. You're never going to be like nice enough and polite enough for them. And it's, I don't know. When Tucker Carlson is, hand wringing about, they got paint on Degas' Little Dancer. And it's like, yeah, I bet you really,
Van Gogh.
Yeah, I really think you care about that.
Yeah. I mean, aren't those like the things that coastal elites love?
Yeah.
Like, why? Wait, you care about fine art, but also you're a salt of the earth country boy who likes horseback. Like, what's going on?
Yeah, I think it's always going to be weaponized against the climate movement, and to the extent that you can like prevent that happening, then yeah, you should consider it. But like, I don't think you're ever really going to like do it in a way that they like.
Yeah.
Rollie, this one's for you. We've kind of talked about this a little bit, but this is from James. Have you ever one-on-one personally changed the mind of a climate denier or even dented their impenetrably sound logic enough that you thought they might question something later? Really struggling with the climate deniers in my life, and no matter how many times I hold them down and force them to listen to your podcast, thank you. Every listen counts. They insist on being deniers.
Yeah, I don't think I have personally witnessed somebody change their brain around, and I think that's not the point. And I think like if your goalpost is to say something that's so fucking cool that they're like, yep, okay, my opinion is different, I think that's a really, really hard goalpost to hit. I will say like a handful of people in my life were like skeptics, and then I was like, no, you think I'm smart, right? And they're like, yeah, I guess so. And then I'm like, well, I just went to school for 2 years for this, and I can tell you definitively, here's the thing. And they're like, oh, okay. And so then they slowly rewire themselves, but not because I said it and they care about me, but because they hadn't like dug in on a point of view, and they were able to be like, yeah, I'll swap my opinion out for a different opinion, and I can like know that I can be confident in that opinion. But I think once people like make it part of their personality where they're like a climate denier, that's a hard position to backtrack from. I think it takes like probably a lot of one-on-one time and taking them out to ice cream and like going to the movies and being like, wasn't that a great movie we just saw? And like, I don't know. I don't want to date a bunch of climate deniers until they believe me. So I think I just don't aim at them. It's sort of like that wonderful phrase, shoot for the moon, and even if you miss, you'll land among the stars.
Shoot for the moon, and you will, if you miss, you might hit one of Elon Musk's satellites.
You'll for sure hit one of those satellites.
And kind of ricochet off into the space junk that orbits our planet.
Right, and you have tops 6 minutes to live because there ain't no air in space. Like, shoot for being a good climate communicator, and you will convince one climate denier's worth of people by being an effective communicator. And it's not going to be one dipshit who's like, oh, you're right. The Chinese aren't doing a hoax for climate change to make the U.S. bad at business or whatever that dumb tweet was. But you will like bring enough people along that in aggregate, you will flip people's opinions, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, Nicole, I got a question for you. This question comes from Braden. Nicole, what's it like working with Rollie? Oh, shit. Hang on. He is hilarious.
Okay.
I swear this is a real question. He's hilarious, but does he really shovel it on for the shoes? What the fuck does that mean?
For the show, maybe?
No, I'm reading Braden's question, Nicole. Okay. Please don't interrupt me. He's hilarious, but does he really shovel it on for the shoes, or is he really that ebullient? Rollie, where do you get your cocaine? Okay, so is this a question for me or a question for Nicole? My God. Does he really shovel it on for the shoes? I think that sounds like a nice country adage.
Yeah.
Oh, he's shoveling it on for the shoes. Is this guy working hard? Like, look at how muddy his boots are. He must be working so hard. He's just shoveling it on for the shoes.
Yeah.
So that when he goes to the bar after,
he's like, oh boy, what a hard day at work I had shoveling.
Shoveling, yeah. It's like, oh, I was shoveling so much it got all over my shoes of all places.
Yeah.
It's like, you only shovel it on for the shoes.
I think that's right. That sounds right. This has turned into a bit. I'm going to answer this question sincerely.
Okay.
And I'm going to answer the question with the thing I like best about working with you and the thing that I find most frustrating about working with
awesome.
you. The thing that I like best...
I get it from Terry. Terry gives me my cocaine. Sorry.
The thing that I like best about working with Rollie is that he is the most genuinely, effortlessly funny person that I know.
Wow.
Easily.
This is too nice.
The reason I love working with him is because nobody makes me laugh harder. Except my wonderful boyfriend Jordan. If you're listening, this is probably behind the paywall, but just in case to cover my tracks.
Yeah, if you don't have a Patreon subscription, he doesn't have a Patreon subscription to this podcast.
Rollie is so funny.
Wow.
He comes up with ideas that like nobody else can come up with. Just in conversation, he's so fast. He's my favorite improviser to play with because his specifics are so funny. Just the raw like talent and funniness of him. The part that is the most frustrating about working with Rollie.
And that's all the time we have, Nicole. So sorry.
The part that is the most frustrating about working with Rollie, and it took me a long time to understand this, is that part of Rollie's process is after we have come to what I think is very close to finishing a project, he'll be like, actually, what if we did this? And then we have to tear up the entire thing and start over from square one.
Square two, probably.
When we were like making sketches together and stuff, I would very often like get in my head about it and be like, he doesn't like my work. We put all this effort into it. We spent all this time. If we had like done work better at the beginning, then we would have been done with it by now. And what I have since realized is like, it is that willingness to tear up something that Rollie has already worked very hard on that like is what makes his content so good and so unique. And I will even go as far to say that now that I work for one Mr. Jon Stewart, that is exactly what his process is on the show. So working with Rollie has I have said this at work before. I've said that working with Rollie has really prepared me for the frustration of writing an entire monologue for Jon Stewart and him going, great, I'm going to write it myself now.
And at work, everyone's like, who the fuck is Rollie? Who are you talking about? Stop talking about this guy. Well, that is just about the nicest thing that's ever been said about me, Nicole. Thank you very much.
And the worst thing about working with Rollie is his body odor.
What? Okay, that's the worst thing that's ever been. And I know...
Fun to note that was not part of the question.
Oh, that's right.
Was it not part of the question?
It's not part of the question.
Well, no. Because the question was, what's it like to work with Rollie?
No, the question was, does he really shovel it on for the shoes?
He does not shovel it on for the shoes. He is what you see on Climate Town and what you get on the podcast is what you get driving 2 hours to an improv festival with Rollie.
And stopping to go watch The Gentleman.
Which we
in
did
that
do.
Fucking mall with the Orange Julius. That was awesome. Okay, so I know this isn't part of the question. The real question for me is where I get my cocaine, which is obviously not a real question that I would
From
answer.
Hunter Biden.
You know that's the good stuff. And I want to say, what's it like working with Nicole? It is fucking awesome. And I think here's the thing that you guys don't know about Nicole. You might know, but you might have gleaned this from her. But Nicole can take a subject that's not funny at all, close her eyes, and just think it funny. And like she'll like write something funny about it. And she can do this not once, but every single time. And it is unbelievable. She's the hardest working person in comedy, and she's the most prolific producer in comedy, a producer of comedy. She's not a producer, she's a comedian. Don't hire her as a producer.
I wouldn't be good at it.
Her time is so fucking spread thin right now. She's working 11 jobs, and one of them is The Daily Show. Other people would quit some of their jobs, not Nicole. She gets more jobs when she gets work on The Daily Show. Hardest working comedian and funniest comedian in comedy. And that is a pretty tough combo to beat.
Thank you, Rollie. And if anybody listening to this is an Emmy voter, remember that when you make your selections in the next few weeks.
There's no fucking way this is coming out by the time the Emmy voters could vote on something. And for the record, Nicole does shovel it on for the shoes. She walked in here and her shoes were caked in mud, and there's no mud in Brooklyn.
That's true.
It just does not exist. And Nicole brought it in from Poughkeepsie. She gets it FedExed
I get it imported.
in. Yeah. She opens the box up and she smells it like it's a bag of coffee. It's fucked up.
And then I shovel it on my shoes.
And then she takes a little shovel. And not like a trowel, but a little tiny doll shovel.
Okay, Rollie, this question is from Danny A. Wow, coming in accusatory off the top.
Oh, great.
I question your credentials.
Hell yeah.
Do you really expect us to swallow all your fibs and condescensions? Wake up. It's been in front of us since the jump. With Rollie or Rollie
Yep.
Williams.
Can't spell Raleigh without lie.
And Nicole Conlan, or should I say Nicole, like Cole.
Oh, I did not understand.
I should have showed you how he spelled it. Nicole Conlan.
Nice. That's a lot of...
it doesn't look great for me.
Yeah, or me. Like, our names have negative sounding words in them. It's like when I made a YouTube video and one time the URL that it generated had the word fuck in it. I was like, what? You can't do that. I had to re-upload the video.
I don't think I would have, because I wouldn't have considered that like platforms would block it. Pretty funny.
Yeah, it's pretty funny.
Anyway, listeners, we're sorry and we promise to do better.
We won't take any more fossil fuel money. Hey there, a little inside baseball. We record this very podcast at the Climate Town office. And if you're not familiar with Climate Town, it's a YouTube series we make for as cheaply as possible. And that means schlepping our camera equipment all over New York City.
Yes, our backpacks are full, and the gear we reach for every time is peak design.
That voice you just heard is Ben Boult, the executive producer of this podcast and of Climate Town.
That's right, Rollie.
I mean, this is an ad, but we are genuinely loaded with peak design gear, from backpacks to sling bags to camera accessories. And by we, I usually just mean Ben. Ben literally has like 7 things from Peak Design on during any given shoot.
Yeah, Rollie, I mean, they make good stuff. My freaking phone case from Peak Design. My phone charger on my desk. That's Peak Design too. My out front bike mount that I can put my phone on. Guess what? Peak Design. You know that little tripod we use on Climate Town shoots?
The little travel tripod?
The little travel tripod. They got organizers. They got straps, clips, duffel bags, everyday bags.
And they're not fucking around. Peak Design gear is guaranteed for life, whether you buy it first hand or 10th hand.
And they can make that kind of commitment and not go broke because they build stuff to last.
As my father would say, it's built like a brick shithouse. And now I'm hearing it out loud, that term is a little dated.
Peak Design is a certified fair trade B Corp that prides itself on recyclable materials, and it lobbies lawmakers in D.C. for environmental legislation. They're also the group who nominated Climate Town to be an environmental partner with 1% for the planet, so double thank you. And they also have been a podcast supporter of ours from day one. And also, they just make really good stuff.
So go to peakdesign.com/playbook. That's PEAK design.com/playbook for 20% off some of our favorite products and a picture of Ben on set dripping with Peak Design gear.
I'm literally going to try to put as many pieces of Peak Design gear as I possibly can into one picture.
I'm glad we just got health insurance because Ben's back is going to be demoed.
But not because the Peak Design stuff is heavy. The other shit that we put inside it.
In bulk, it's heavy.
If you
stack enough Peak Design stuff.
Yeah, okay.
I'm not saying it's heavy gear.
They got a
it's
sweet
good
shoulder
gear.
strap. It really takes the weight off your shoulder.
It's going to crush you to death.
If that's how I got to go, sayonara.
Hey, Nicole.
What's up, Rollie?
I just wanted to remind you to stock up on Patriot Powder for your underground bunker. Ah, yes, good old Patriot Powder has 10,000 grams of fiber in every serving to ward off all that communism.
Rollie, I gotta stop you right there because that sounds like a fake ad for an awful product to highlight the fact that you can listen to this podcast ad-free over on our Patreon page.
Oh, you're talking about our The Climate Deniers Playbook Patreon page with ad-free episodes and that's it?
That's not even close to it.
Huh?
Our Patreon page also has exclusive Patreon-only bonus episodes, as well as perks like being able to vote on future topics and the ability to talk directly to the Climate Deniers Playbook team.
Now, maybe I just ate too many servings of Patriot Powder, but isn't this podcast completely free to produce and requires no additional team members besides me and Rollie?
You are Rollie. How much Patriot Powder did you eat?
Bonus episodes?
Why don't you take 5 and I'll close this one out?
Good, because it just got really blue in here.
Joining the Patreon page keeps the show independent, and it helps us pay the people who work on this podcast. We've got a whole team of researchers and producers, which is good because if one person tried to read through all of this climate denial propaganda on their own, I think their face would melt off like in Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Oh, hey, melted face syndrome is actually also a side effect of Patriot Powder, now with extra goo.
So join the Patreon page for fun, exclusive perks, and a community of our other generous, cool patrons who like the kind of content we're producing over here and want to see more of it in the world.
Now, I may be temporarily powder blind, but if I ever regain my sight and see one of you Patreon supporters out on the street, I'm going to give you a big hug, or handshake, or fist bump, or just leave you the hell alone, depending on your personal preference. Patreon.com/deniersplaybook. My
Link in the
teeth are
description.
vibrating.
God damn it, Rollie.
Me, Rollie? Thank you so much for submitting your questions. I think we got to all of them. I'm hearing that no, not even close. How dare I say that? And Ben is storming out of the room. Okay, so maybe we didn't get them all, but we tried our best. And we'll get more of them in the next mailbag episode. Now, this next section is questions that we got from people who work on the Climate Deniers Playbook. And I will say this is not something you see from every podcast, because in those podcasts, people are free to just talk to each other normal. We refuse. We don't listen. We don't talk outside of the context of the podcast.
Absolutely
and we don't accept
not.
questions from anybody besides each other.
Mm-mm.
So this is the
They
one
work for
day a
us,
year.
and I'm going to let them question me?
Yeah. Questions cost money.
I don't think so, baby.
Who are you? Alec Trebek? He's dead. So Sorry about that. But anyway, so on one day a year, we do allow questions from people who work on the podcast, and we got them right here. So, Nicole, the first one's for you. This comes from Editor Greg.
We love Editor Greg.
We love Editor Greg. So, Editor Greg says, what do you think is probably the most effective thing most local municipalities could be doing, would actually want to do, and is the absolute lowest hanging fruit for reducing emissions or improving climate mitigation? And this is the lightning round, so try to answer it pretty quick.
Lowest hanging fruit, certainly just eliminating parking minimums.
Parking minimums, cars, improving your roads,
but
more walkable streets.
Eliminating parking minimums and maybe forbidding single family zoning, but there's literally no reason that we need a parking minimum.
Great.
Eliminating parking minimums, again, doesn't mean that you eliminate any parking. It just means that you're not required to have a certain amount. That won't necessarily directly eliminate emissions, but it is very low hanging fruit and it discourages car use.
Love it.
And if you want more info, Rollie did a whole episode on parking, which I'm the one who originally pitched it to him. So you're welcome.
That's true. Thank you.
You can go check that out on his YouTube.
Hell yeah.
Okay, Rollie, we have 2 questions from our researcher, Carly.
Oh, hello, Carly.
Hello, Carly. Her first question is, what are your thoughts on the climate impacts of the Olympics?
Oh, God, I didn't even for a second think about it. I've had such a bad case of Olympic fever, and I've just been watching all the swimming events that I love. So the climate impacts of the Olympics are probably pretty negative the way they currently do the Olympics. I think there is some obvious benefit to having all the countries of the world interact in a very peaceful and fun, competitive way, and I think the Olympics are a cool tradition of that. The way we do it right now, where it's cities are bidding for the Olympics, and once they win it, they spend a ton of money changing land and building a bunch of shit that a lot of times just falls into disrepair, and that's all really shitty and terrible. So I think maybe we could fix the Olympics by just having 3 or 4 permanent Olympic villages and just rotating between those 4. And every event should be swimming now.
I think that's probably right. Here's what I will say about Paris is they did use that investment to make real substantial improvements to the city. They cleaned up the Seine. Not quite enough because somebody just got E. coli and now they can't compete in the rest of their competitions.
That could have come from any river, Nicole.
But it's they didn't just clean it for this event. They reinvested in the city's infrastructure to make their wastewater more sustainable. So that's huge. I was again just in Paris, and they made big improvements to their already pretty good metro system. It feels going from Paris to coming back to the poor beleaguered MTA feels like going from Mars to Des Moines. It's so God. The MTA.
I mean, you know what it is. The MTA is going to send a bunch of boats to Paris, and Paris is going to be send us your poor and you're tired and your huddled masses. It's a switcheroo.
It's a switcheroo.
The best revenge is a life well lived.
So Paris has used their money to make a lot of improvements that are good. Again, flying all the athletes in, that's tough. But
some of them swim in.
That's true.
I think.
I
saw
Angeles,
a Visa commercial where Michael Phelps swam. So I think.
And if you can't believe a Visa commercial, what can you believe?
I don't know.
I'm hopeful that Los Angeles will use that huge money that's coming to them in 2028 to make a lot of improvements to their public transportation system. I think that one of the biggest problems is obviously you just sort of shove the homeless people off a cliff and deal with that.
It's synchronized diving, Nicole.
So that's a big problem. I am a little bit more bullish on the Olympics, I think, than most people are.
You're bullish on everything.
I really am, because I also have Olympics fever.
You say Olympics fever? That's the European strain.
Yeah, exactly. It's like maths fever. Wow. Great answer, Rollie. And
Thank
me
you.
for jumping in and sort of taking over your question. Good for me.
You know what? We passed the baton of the question.
We sure did. Just like they do in...
Swimming. My swimming.
Carly has another question.
Hey.
Carly also wants to know, do you have any old embarrassing sketch videos? And maybe you could play one and comment on it while it's playing.
Oh,
and
okay.
Rollie, we have several options. And for those of you who don't know, Rollie and I have done comedy together for a long time. And we have several sketch comedy videos out there. And I've queued up some for us to choose from. We have this one that is about climate change. We have one that is a news report from an alternate universe where people took climate change seriously. We also have the Honest Airline Safety video, which I think is one of the ones that will translate best to audio only.
Yeah.
And then we have...
the 8 people you always see on a run.
The 8
that
people
was
you
so
always,
good. And that's the end of the preview. Thanks for listening. If you want to hear the whole episode, head on over to our Patreon page where we got the whole thing ad-free. Now, do not worry. We got a bunch of episodes right here for free, but if you want to support the show and hear us cracking wise about other people's mamas, the Patreon page is the place to do it. I hope to see you there, but obviously, you do you. Bye.